Just how bad was the 80's crack epidemic towards blacks and Latinos in America?
Oh, very bad, very bad, very bad. That was one hell of a actually epidemic, that really crippled blacks, as well as Latinos as well too. At the same time, also, that lasted a everlasting effect even till today. And I got a couple of points I'm going to bring out on that too. I'm glad that you asked that too. I think the crack epidemic, I think that it was actually from, I would say from 1984 is when it started really, popularizing itself and really rearing its head amongst the black communities. I know I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and I know I was in high school at the time. And that's when I had first actually heard about it. It was like 1984, 1985. But before that, prior to that, it was actually called freebasing until they mixed the ingredients with a more potent ingredient that got you hooked a little bit faster. And they sold it, very cheap, in the black community. So $5, 2 for $7, and a lot of times, us as black people, when we want to have a good time, we want to party, we want to forget everything, what do? We kind of relegate ourselves to using drugs, drinking, hard liquor, alcohol to forget our problems. But prior to that, black family households, you had a median, of high working percentage, of blacks and Latinos in a household. And prior to that, as far as the Vietnam War, because we had actually, just before that, we had not too long, just came from the Jim Crow era in segregation, like in the 1920s. So then you have the Vietnam War. And let me show you something, how white America and how they strategically plan stuff. While we sit around, we want to be athletes, we want to be entertainers. I'm going to show you something, how white America strategically plans stuff purposely and intentionally to the black and Latino communities. Vietnam War, 1955, and I think it ended in 1975. So during that time, when the Vietnam War was actually going on, that was the largest, without getting into anything specific, that was the largest marginalization of the separation of the black community. Before that, we had our own banks. Black people owned beaches. We had our own communities. We had our own stores. Look up the Carr sisters. They was sisters that lived in Virginia that owned beaches. You had over in California, you had black owners of Bruce Beach. You had down in Florida as well too. So we was just coming off of being self-reliant, during this time, helping one another. We were having our own banks in our community. There was more than one Black Wall Street during this time. You had a Black Wall Street right in Durham, North Carolina. That was actually the first Black Wall Street. Okay, and then you had Tulsa, Oklahoma, which during the time it was a little bit more commercialized. Okay, and you know how that story ended. It got burnt down to the ground, from jealousy, of course, from white America. Whatever they can't control, what do? They destroy. So during the time of the Vietnam War, you had blacks over in Vietnam, mostly blacks and Hispanics. And that tore the black family apart because prior to the Vietnam War, again, we were segregated. That's when we was at our strongest point, when we were segregated. We had our own banks, had our own supermarkets. I'm gonna say it again, had our own hospitals, had our own daycare centers. We had our own car washes. We had our own airports. This was all going on during the time of segregation before white America poked their nose in our business and wanted to join and wanted to tax us. And we're no longer, a community or a neighborhood any longer, it's just called just the hood, because we're no longer neighborly towards one another. We're no longer friendly towards one another. And the crack epidemic had a lot to do with that. They were growing, they had poppy fields over in Vietnam. Black men was over in Vietnam getting high. They came back, welfare reform bill. Black woman, she signed. while her man was over in Vietnam, the welfare reform bill was formed back then also, and that was a large epidemic also within the black community as well too, the heroin epidemic. But again, we're survivors. We're going to figure out a way to survive. And in the 80s, they said, okay, we got to get them again. They said we got to get them again. And unfortunately, it worked.